Hello, welcome. Dr. Sushma Singh this side. Today in Unit 24 Secularization, we start our lecture with topic Secularism in India. Right from the beginning, Indian secularism drew its strength from pluralism. Secularism in the Indian tradition was not the opposition of religion but was related to communalism. While Europe being mono-religious, secularism was not the opposite of communalism, as there was no struggle for domination, not the opposite of communalism between various religious communities. This is the crucial difference between the Western and the Indian concept of secularism. In Europe, there was a struggle between the Christians and the church, while in India the struggle was between one religious community and the other. In India, the senior leaders of both the communities emphasized justice in power sharing without questioning the religious authority of either community at any stage. Indian came across the concept of secularism in 19th century under the influence of the British rule. It had never been the part of Indian scene before. Unlike Europe, India did not undergo any Renaissance movement. It was only in late 19th century when the mutiny failed and the British consolidated their rules that the Indian opened their mind to the Western influences. But the Western ideas became popular only among a small section of Indians in urban areas. The British rule was essentially secular as they began to impose secular laws, replacing many of the religious laws. They also imposed common criminal code, though they did not touch personal laws. It was a new experience for the Indians. They had always followed religious laws and traditions so far. There did not exist any concept of secular law until then, and any deviation from these laws and traditions was strongly condemned. It even attracted punishment like social boycott and excommunications. In the case of Hindus, caste rules were followed very rigidly indeed. The word secular in political sense was used after formation of Indian National Congress in 1885. The word secular in Indian political terminology came to be used in a pluralistic setting and not in a Western sense that it indicated indifference to religion. As we know, in the West, the concept of secularism emerged as a result of a struggle between the church and the political rulers. The church was dominating the political scene and denied independence to the ruling monarchies in various parts of the Europe. Thus, as a result of this struggle, the concept of secular polity emerged in Europe. It should also be noted that European society was for all practical purposes a mono-religious society. Thus, secularism had a very different connotation in the Western context. It is essentially signified a political authority totally independent of church. The concept of secularism in India emerged in the context of religious pluralism as against religious authoritarianism in the West. Secularism was emphasized by the Indian National Congress to allay the apprehension of religious minorities, particularly the Muslims, that it was not a Hindu political formation. It was a religious community rather than a religious authority, which mattered in Indian context. Secularism in Indian context had very different connotation right from the very beginning. It related more to community and its secular interest rather than religion and its authority. Throughout our independence struggle, we were faced with secular or communal dichotomy. But none of our political leaders thought of challenging any religious authority, Hindu or Muslim. On the contrary, these leaders held out repeated assurance that both Hindu and Muslim would be free to profess and practice their respective religions both in an individual and a collective sense. Not only this, the political leadership used existing religious institutions to draw Hindu and Muslim masses into political processes. Thus, the Tilak used Shivaji and Ganesh festival to create political consciousness among the Hindu masses. Gandhiji too used the concept of Ram Rajya on the one hand to draw Hindu masses and the Khilafat movement on the other to attract the Muslim masses. Religion and the religious institutions had to be used repeatedly to inspire people towards political action. Thus, Indian secularism never collided either with religion or religious authority. On the contrary, it drew upon it and its institutions to reinforce political processes. At the base of the freedom movement widened in the 1920s with the advent of Mahatma Gandhi, and as he proceeded to fine-tune the techniques of mass resistance that he had developed in South Africa. Previously marginal groups were brought into the freedom struggle and Indian society became united under the influence of overarching call for freedom. But paradoxically, the same period was to see the advent of fundamentalist and rabid groups, both Hindu and Muslim, who began to politicize religion and thereby divide Indian society. And as we have seen all over the world today, religious identification is often the product of a political movement and not necessarily the precondition for such a movement. In sum, we were to see parallel movements in India, one that united people on the lines of the anti-colonial struggle and the other that divided people in the name of religion. Here we want to close this lecture. Thanks for listening.